was just after 6:30 in the evening at the Naval Amphibious Base in Coronado, and the mess hall buzzed WH noise. Trainees in sand-colored fatigues filled the long metal tables, laughing too loudly, bragging about the day's training. Fluorescent lights reflected off steel trays and polished floors, a sterile calm that carried the scent of sweat and sea salt. Lieutenant Erin Takoda moved quietly through the line, her Navy working uniform crisp, her name tape clean, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun. She carried herself, WH, the quiet confidence of someone who belonged, though few there knew exactly how much she did. She took a seat near the corner, her tray simple, her eyes on her food. Around her, the laughter rose and fell until a group of 5 young men entered, loud and restless. They had just finished Phase 1 of BUD, divided by S training, and carried the swagger of men who had survived Hell Week. One of them, tall and broad, WH, a shaved head, noticed Erin and smirked. He nudged his friend, who turned, followed his gaze, and grinned back. The tall one started walking toward her table, his boots echoing over the linoleum. He asked if she was lost, his tone half joking, half mocking. Erin looked up briefly, met his eyes, and told him she was fine where she was. The group laughed behind him. Another trainee added that the mess hall was for operators, not admin staff. Erin's fork paused above her tray. Her posture didn't change, but her silence carried weight. The tall trainee stepped closer, too close for military decorum, testing her reaction. Erin looked up again, her voice low, steady, almost kind. She told him to step away before this became a problem. He chuckled, confident, unaware of the thin line he had just crossed. His hand brushed her shoulder, and in that instant, everything shifted. Erin moved fast, but WH control, her right hand came up to deflect his arm. Her left elbow struck clean into his solar plexus, and the air left his lungs in a sharp grunt. Another trainee lunged forward, only to be pulled off balance and sent sprawling to the floor. The third reached for her from behind, but she twisted free, a quick strike to his thigh dropping him before he could react. The noise died. Trays stopped clattering. The remaining 2 stood frozen, unsure whether to help or retreat. Erin straightened her uniform, breathing steady, her voice calm as she told them to stand down. The tall trainee struggled to rise, gasping for breath, his confidence gone. The mess hall was silent when she looked around, her eyes sharp but controlled. For the first time, the room seemed to realize they had no idea who she really was. Erin Takoda grew up on the Colville Reservation in eastern Washington, a stretch of rugged pine hills and quiet lakes that taught patience to anyone who lived there. Her grandfather, Gunnery Sergeant Robert Takoda, a Marine Scout sniper who had fought in Vietnam, spent long hours WH her in the woods behind their house. He rarely spoke of the war, but his lessons carried the same precision that once kept him alive. He taught her how to move, W-hout sound, how to breathe evenly even when her heart was pounding, and how to wah for the right moment instead of forcing. He said that silence was not weakness, was control. At 14, Erin went hunting WH him for the first time. The morning air was cold enough to BE through her gloves. She lay in the dirt beside her grandfather, her cheek against the stock of a Remington 700 rifle. A mule deer grazed across the clearing nearly 300 yards away. Her grandfather whispered that she had the hands for. She took a slow breath, just as he had taught her, and squeezed the trigger. The sound cracked across the hills, and the deer dropped instantly. She lowered the rifle, her heart racing, her hands steady. Her grandfather nodded once, pride hidden behind his calm eyes. That single moment, quiet and absolute, defined the kind of focus she would carry for the rest of her life. Years later at Washington State University, Erin studied exercise physiology, She was a middle-distance runner, clocking a 4:38 mile, and loved the rhythm of her lungs burning as much as the finish line self. But something about felt too safe. She had spent years measuring progress in seconds and meters, but she wanted to test something deeper. After graduation, she enlisted in the Navy at 21, drawn by the challenge of the water, the discipline, and the service her grandfather had embodied. In 2019, 1 year after the Navy opened SEAL training to women, she applied for BUD divided by S. Out of more than 200 applicants, only 3 were women. From the first day, the instructors pushed them all to their limb S. Erin learned fast that pain was a language everyone there spoke. During log PT, 6-person teams carried 200-pound logs over their heads, waves crashing around them until shoulders went numb. During drown-proofing, her wrists and ankles were tied as she floated, bobbed, and swam across the pool. Her breath measured, her heartbeat slow. Hell Week broke most of them. The nights blurred into each other, sleepless and cold, sand grinding into every blister. Erin stopped counting the hours, somewhere around 2:30 a.m. on the 4th day. She kept moving, one evolution at a time, her mind repeating her grandfather's voice, telling her to stay still inside, even when everything screamed to quo. By the end of the week, only a fraction of the class remained. Pool competency tested her patience the hardest. Instructors yanked the regulator from her mouth, twisted her air hose into knots, and watched as she fought to untangle on the pool floor. Every instinct told her to swim for the surface, but she remembered the lesson from the woods. Stay calm. Wah. Fix what you can before you move. She passed the test without panic, surfacing only when she was done. The final phase brought the soft sand runs along Coronado's beach. The wind stung her face, her legs heavy as she pushed through mile after mile, the ocean glinting under the sun. When she crossed the last finish line, there was no celebration, only silence and the quiet understanding of those who had made. In April 2021, Erin graduated from BUD divided by S and completed SEAL qualification training. 6 months later, the day she received her Trident, she felt the same steady calm she had at 14 the rifle in her hands. Wasn't triumph she felt. Was the stillness that comes when you know you've earned your place. The tall trainee's hand landed on Erin's shoulder, rough and careless. The touch was light, but crossed a line. Every operator understood. Her chair scraped the floor as she rose, her expression unreadable. Around them, the mess hall noise dimmed. Curiosity spreading like a ripple through the room. Erin's voice stayed low, the kind that warned rather than threatened. She told him to back off before this became something he could not handle. The kid laughed, his friends shifting behind him, their grins. Tight expectation. The movement came fast. Erin's right arm came up, parrying his hand away while her left elbow struck hard into his solar plexus. The sound left him in a gasp, folding him over his own breath. Before his friends registered what happened, she pivoted on her left foot, using his body weight against him, her hip snapping under his center of gravity. The throw was smooth, controlled, the kind you learned after hundreds of repetitions on mats that smelled of salt and sweat. His boots ached the floor, a dull thud. Another trainee lunged from her right. Erin turned, sidestepped, and guided his momentum past her. A shove to his upper arm, redirecting him into the table edge. Trays crashed, food scattered, and the air shifted from laughter to shock. The third man came in from behind, his hand reaching for her shoulder in a clumsy grab. Erin dropped her center of gravity, twisted, and drove her knee precisely into the outside of his thigh. Striking the perineal nerve, his leg buckled, his body folding, as if someone cut a wire. The last two froze mid-step, their confidence drained, replaced by something colder and sharper. Erin's straightened hair uniform. Eyes steady. The man on the floor wheezed. Another rubbed his knee. And the others stood motionless. The entire room held breath. The sound of the air conditioner suddenly loud against the silence. She spoke evenly, telling them they had one chance to walk away and learn something from this. The warning hung there. Calm and final. No one moved. The door near the serving line opened, and a familiar voice cut through the quiet déchet. Senior Chief Garrett Moss. A tall man, weathered skin, and years of salt in his eyes, stepped into view. He scanned the scene, the stillness of someone who had seen worse 1,000 times before. His gaze lingered on the fallen trainees. Then on Erin. He asked for her rank and commune ye. His tone direct but steady. Erin answered, Lieutenant. Naval Special Warfare. SEAL. For a second, the air self seemed to pause. Moss gave a small nod, then turned to the trainees. Report to the command duty office in 5 minutes. His voice left no room for debate. They stumbled up, collecting their trays. Eyes low. When they were gone, Moss faced Erin again. He said quietly that he remembered her class, Bud divided by S-345. One of the toughest he had ever seen. Erin gave a short nod. He told her she handled herself right, that what she did was measured, not reckless. She met his eyes and said she only did what needed to be done. Around them, sailors began to move again. Conversations returning in cautious whispers. The mess hall felt different now. Every glance carried a new awareness, a silent respect. Erin sat down, her posture calm, her face unreadable. Moss lingered for a moment, then gave her a final nod before walking away. The room's noise returned, but not the same. The trainees would tell the story later, each time realizing a little more of what meant to underestimate someone who earned the Trident. The morning after the incident, the base was quiet under a thin layer of fog that rolled in from the Pacific. The call from the command office came at 7:15 a.m. sharp. Lieutenant Erin Takoda walked across the concrete walkway toward the administrative wing of SEAL Team 7 headquarters. Her boots polished, hair uniform pressed. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. She knocked once and stepped into Commander Eric Dalton's office. Dalton sat behind his desk, posture straight, eyes sharp but calm. To his right stood Senior Chief Garrett Moss, hands clasped behind his back. The commander gestured for Erin to S. The room felt still, the kind of quiet that carried author Y. Dalton began by reviewing the incident report. The 5 BUD divided by S trainees had been counseled, 2 formally dropped from training for conduct unbecoming, and the remaining 3 reassigned. He paused, reading a line from the report before looking up. He said her actions were efficient, decisive, and hin the rules of engagement for self-defense. He added that few officers showed that kind of restraint under pressure. Dalton set the file down and leaned back slightly, studying her. He asked why she had never reported her SEAL qualification when she arrived at Coronado 8 months earlier. Erin kept her eyes steady and replied that she preferred to do her job quietly, without drawing attention or being treated differently. Her voice stayed even, professional, but there was something behind. The fatigue of someone who had fought harder for credible why than most ever would. Dalton nodded slowly, his expression softening. He told her that humility had S place, but she had earned something worth recognizing. And the commune Y needed operators who could lead by example. Moss stepped forward then, his tone respectful but firm. He told the commander that he had reviewed her file again after the incident. He mentioned the Bronze Star recommendation from Syria, the after-action report that described how she had held her position under fire while coordinating air support. He said her calmness that night in Deir ez-Zor was the same control he saw in the mess hall. Dalton listened, his expression unreadable, then looked back at Erin and said the teams needed that kind of composure. especially now. The room stayed quiet for a few seconds before Dalton spoke again. He asked if she would consider returning to an operational team instead of staying in a liaison post. Erin hesitated, the weight of the decision visible in the pause. Then she said she would. Dalton gave a small nod and stood, extending his hand across the desk. He told her that the paperwork would start immediately and that SEAL Team 3 would be proud to have her. Moss added quietly that was good to see her back where she belonged. When Erin left the office, the sun had broken through the fog. She walked across the compound, her cover tucked under her arm. The air warm and still. There was no triumph in her step, only a quiet sense of rightness. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a breath that came easy. The kind that felt like balance after a long fight to stand steady. 6 weeks after the incident at Coronado, Lieutenant Erin Takoda reported for duty at SEAL Team 3. The compound sat on the southern edge of Naval Base San Diego. Walls, line the sound of weights clanging and distant surf breaking against the piers. The first few days passed quietly. Erin kept to herself, arriving early for morning PT before sunrise, running alongside the others through the cool salt air. Some of the men watched her silent judgment, their glances measuring more than her form or endurance. She knew what they were thinking. Words would not change, only time and consistency. Each morning started at 5:30 a.m. The team trained hard, the kind of workouts that left hands torn and shoulders burning. Erin moved through controlled rhythm, not trying to lead, not trying to prove anything. On the range, she worked her Mk-18 CQBR WH-Com precision. The compact rifle snapped in short bursts, each shot finding the target center mass. She broke down the weapon afterward, cleaned and reassembled WH muscle memory from years of repetition. During pistol drills, her SIG-P 320M17 felt like an extension of her hand. When others chatted or bragged about scores, she listened, nodding, reloading magazines in silence. The days blurred together. Dive training came next. Long hours in cold Pacific water. Breathing through the Draeger LARV rebreather, Erin moved slow and deliberate, conserving oxygen, keeping perfect buoyancy as her dive partners struggled to match her rhythm. In planning sessions, she sat quietly near the back, tracking details, updating maps, marking routes. The care of someone who had seen what one missed detail could cost. Gradually, the silence around her began to shift. Teammates started asking her opinion, small things at first, then tactics, then call signs. Respect came not through talk, but through watching her do everything right. Out seeking attention. 3 months later, SEAL Team 3 deployed to the Horn of Africa for a counterterrorism mission. Their objective was to capture a high-value target linked to regional militant networks in southern Somalia. The mission went clean. The team cleared the compound, secured intel, and began exfiltration before dawn. The desert wind carried fine dust through their NVGs as they moved toward the extraction zone. Erin scanned the ridgeline through her PVS-31 night vision goggles and caught movement before anyone else. 2 technical trucks, mounted DSK-12. 7mm machine guns were closing from 300 meters out. She called in over the radio, her tone level and precise. Raven 3 to Hammer, 2 to 1. Troops in contact. Grid 45 QXD 223674. Requesting immediate close air support. Lieutenant Commander Ramirez, their patrol leader, gave the order to return fire and Reposian. Erin dropped to a knee, firing short. Controlled bursts from her Mk-18, walking rounds across the truck's hood to force the gunner down. The rest of the team followed, setting up suppressive fire as rounds chewed the sand around them. The enemy opened up the DSK, tracers streaking across the darkness. Minute is stretched. Then the thump of rotor blades filled the air An AH-64 Apache swung low over the horizon. Cannon roaring as 30mm rounds tore into the enemy trucks. The firefight ended as quickly as began. Silence returning WH. Only the hiss of cooling barrels. Ramirez turned toward Erin. His face hidden behind goggles, but his tone unmistakably sincere. "You saved lives tonight." Later, as the team rode back to the forward base, no one spoke much. The heat had settled, and exhaustion hung over them. But when Erin moved through the cabin, the glances that met her were different. They were not measuring her anymore. They were acknowledging her. From that day, she was no longer the woman who earned the Trident. She was the operator who kept them alive under fire. The rain came steady that morning over the Colville Reservation. Thin gray light spilling across the hills. The air smelled of pine and wet earth, the kind of quiet that felt almost like respect. Lieutenant Erin Takoda stood in dress blues beside her brother as the honor guard folded the flag, WH slow. Deliberate movements. Each crease was sharp, every motion precise. The same discipline her grandfather had once carried through his own years in uniform. When the final triangle of blue and stars was formed, the Marine in front stepped forward and handed to her brother. He turned to Erin, his hands trembling slightly from the cold. Inside the folds of the flag rested a small photograph, edges worn, but colors still bright. Was a picture of her on the day she graduated, BUD divided by S. Eyes tired. Uniform soaked. The trident shining just above her heart. Her brother told her their grandfather had asked to be buried WH that photo. Erin looked down at, feeling a quiet ache rise in her chest. Not from grief alone, but from the weight of everything that had led her there. He had seen her long before anyone else had. The calm behind her strength. The patience beneath her will. The rifles fired their salute, each shot echoing off the wet hillside. Erin did not flinch. She stood at attention, heels together, hand raised in a slow salute. The rain ran down her sleeve, pooling on the brim of her cover before falling to the mud below. Around hair, the sound faded until only the soft rhythm of rain remained. She remembered his lessons, the way he had taught her to move W-hout noise, to breathe evenly when fear pressed close, to wah until the moment mattered most. When the ceremony ended, people began to drift away, their voices low. Erin stayed a little longer, standing by the fresh mound of earth, her hands steady at her sides. The photograph was still tucked in the folds of the flag against her chest. She thought about the years between that first hunting trip and this moment, about the way he had shaped her without needing to say much. The silence between them had always been his own kind of language. As she turned to leave, the clouds broke slightly, a thin band of light cutting through the rain. She paused, looked once more at the grave, and felt something ease inside her. She no longer carried the need to prove herself. She had done what she came to do. She had honored his name. In that quiet, the voice in her memory was clear again. Steady as ever. Respect is earned through action, not words.